This section we're going to discuss revenue or yield management. Both terms are used interchangeably, but the common terminology now is typically revenue management. So with revenue management, you're actually very familiar with revenue management if you've ever booked a flight online. This essentially is revenue management. So it's selected by you, the consumer. But revenue management basically is the ability to have different people pay different prices at different times in order to maximize revenue. So if you're on Southwest and you book the Want to Get Away well in advance, it's $94. But if you want Business Select or you have to book late, then it can be much more expensive. So everybody kind of is already familiar with how revenue management works, but these slides we're going to show kind of how it works in a hotel setting. So with revenue management, it's a set of strategies used in the service industry to maximize revenue from our operations. So what we're trying to do is provide the right service product to the right customer at the right time for the right price. So this essentially is the definition of revenue management. With that, one of the characteristics of revenue management is that you have a perishable commodity. And what that means is that it goes away. So, for example, a hotel room, I can only sell one hotel room on one given night, and then the next day I can never sell that hotel room again on the previous night. So that's kind of it's not really technically perishable, but for any given period it's perishable. Some other examples of perishable commodities that can use revenue management are airlines, and that's actually where revenue management began. Hotel rooms, as we mentioned, rental cars, because I can't rent a car today ever again for today, and cruise ship cabins. Once the ship leaves, I can't sell that cruise ship cabin again. So all of these industries in the service area can use revenue management to maximize revenue. Some other characteristics, as we mentioned, it's a perishable inventory. You have to have a relatively fixed capacity. Hotels have a very fixed capacity. You can't just add on to a hotel, in the short term. You need to have high fixed costs and low variable costs. It doesn't really cost that much to change over a hotel room and sell it to somebody else. Advanced reservations are key because we want to get people to pay perhaps a lower rate if they book far enough in advance, but a much higher rate if they book the day of. Same with airlines, same with typically with cruise ships. Time variable demand. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the next section too, but people book at different times, so then we can provide them with different prices. And then we have to have segmental markets. Basically, if you look at the leisure and the business, that's the easiest way to differentiate the segmental markets. So a nice graphic way to look at revenue management is if you have demand is high, so you only have one hotel and all these people want to go into this hotel, then you increase your rates to maximize profits. Whereas if there's a lot of supply and only one person wants to go to this hotel, well, in order to entice them to come to this hotel versus that hotel, the hotel has to lower its rates in order to maximize occupancy. So both of these can be utilized in order to maximize total revenue. Another concept that comes into play with revenue management is the threshold curve. And quickly, what the threshold curve is that you look at the number of reservations that you have booked, and then you have a guided area here based on your history of reservations of where you want your reservations to be at a certain point back from the day of the reservation. So if this is the day of the reservation and we look out 100 days prior, we want to make sure that we're in this blue range in order to make sure that we can maximize our revenue and have a perfect sellout at day zero. So whenever reservations go below the threshold curve, we need to entice people to book with our hotel. So we would then decrease the rate in order to get people to book. And then once we're back into the threshold curve, we keep the rate at that level. But then if we're above the threshold curve, we can increase our rates in order to try to get to maximize revenue, but also to get people to book here in order to come to a perfect sellout. So the thing to remember about the threshold curve is when you're below the threshold curve, you decrease prices, and when you're above the threshold curve, you increase prices. Quickly, some other ways to look at how to maximize revenue is from capacity management. And with this, you want to compare your overbookings with walk-ins, and you try to balance that to make sure that you don't overbook and then have to wind up walking people. But in a hotel where you're not 100% sold out, you would want to hold on and then get walk-ins, and a lot of times with walk-ins you can get higher rates as well. Another thing to consider is discount allocations and duration controls and combinations. So we can discount for 3 nights, let's say, and rack for another night. So we could do different things. New Year's Eve is a good example. We might make sure that people are going to have to stay for 3 nights, but then we might have different rates during the course of those 3 nights. And this is an example from Wynn in Las Vegas, where you can stay Sunday through Thursday for $119, but Friday and Saturday is $199. So it's very common in the hotel industry for a guest who's staying for a number of nights to pay a different rate on different nights depending on that market. We'll end this section here, and then we'll continue with terminology in the next section.